Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing chapter 28, Supermind, Mind, and the Overmind Maya. And we are on page 287, the last paragraph.
Yeah. Before we start this para, because we have a class once a week, we have to state where we are, and from where we have to start. So, he has told us that the supermind creates the world, and the four quaternaries, the divine quaternaries, Chit, Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda, and Supermind, he considers them the four divine quaternaries. It is they themselves, these four elements, which reduce themselves, and by the mysterious process of Maya, they become, in the physical world, they manifest as matter, vital, and mind. And the Ananda becomes a psychic mind, a psychic being, which he is not discussing here. So this is the basic thing. So now he has to show how this process takes place. This is what he's going to see. Okay? It's okay. I'm saying that consciousness becomes unconsciousness. But what is the process by which it becomes unconsciousness? How does it have the power to reduce itself? So this is what he's going to tell us. That's a question that he's going to deal with. He has also said there is a bigger question, that is how the knowledge, the complete knowledge at the higher level, becomes the ignorance of the lower level, that we shall deal with later on, and that goes on to book 2, part 1. So this is in book 1, we are now, and he is examining one aspect, and he has told us that this takes place by exclusive concentration. We have discussed exclusive concentration.
May I ask you to explain to me the last sentence before the beginning of this paragraph?
Okay. So where does it begin?
There can be no such immense hiatus as seems to exist between supramental truth consciousness and the mind in the ignorance. It's just before that begins, yes.
I'm trying to find the beginning. Yes, I've got it. There can be no such immense hiatus as seems to exist between supramental truth consciousness in the mind and in the ignorance. So, what he means is that when we are in the mind, normal mind, we have to struggle for knowledge. We have to struggle to get something done. The principles which are operating in the physical world are ignorance, semi-consciousness, suffering, and incapacity. So, Ananda becomes suffering and pleasure here, and there is consciousness, complete consciousness becomes unconsciousness here in matter, and Chit Shakti, total divine power, omniscient, what is it? Omnipower, what is it? Omnipotence. Omnipotence becomes absolute incapacity here. So, there seems to be a huge difference. That is one, this is the many. That is infinite, this is the finite. That is unlimited, this is limited. How does this happen? So, it seems to be very difficult to explain the connection between the two if there are no gradations. This is what he means. Now, let's read the sentence. There can be no such immense hiatus as seems to exist. So, one and the many, full consciousness and the unconsciousness, they are opposites. How can there be a connection? There can't be a connection. But seem to exist. There are connections. If I have to prove my point that the divine himself has become matter here, the Supreme itself has become matter here, there has necessarily to be a connection. That's what it means.
So when he speaks of half knowledge, or he speaks of the ignorance, he doesn't speak very highly of it.
Of course not. But that is at the lower level. When he talks of ignorance, there's an evolution from that, from the nations of the inconscience, there's a slow evolution. So where we are now, three things have already taken place. From the inconscient, matter has come up, and from matter, life has come out, and from life, mind has come out. So mind is a semi-consciousness. It's not full inconscience. That's what it says. Clear, huh? Okay. So, although it seems to be absolute opposites and there seems to be no connection, there must be a connection. Otherwise, they cannot be connected. And I am saying they are connected. I will show you how they are connected. That's what he's saying. So, I'll read out the summary of the previous paragraph so that we get the continuity. We have seen the principle of the connection of the superconscient to the inconscient or the subconscient. But these two are at opposite poles in the scale of existence. The one becomes the many, the infinite tapers off into the finites of the universe, the formless puts on forms, the permanent becomes transient, the timeless and spaceless becomes transience and dimensional space. We may examine one aspect of this polarity. Let us see the relation of the mind of knowledge to the mind of ignorance. The former is a truth consciousness, and the latter is the limited mind of man in ignorance. These two are so far apart from each other that it seems impossible to connect the two without intermediary gradations. The mortal mind of man is in ignorance. It seeks for truth. The supramental is an eternal possession of the truth. It doesn't need to seek. It has this, and it is itself the truth. Its formations are realities, the formations of the supermind. The thoughts of the mortal mind are artificial constructions, temporary images in the brain. This we have discussed many times, so I won't go into details. Okay. Of course, this mind is much hampered by the downward pull of the grossness of matter and the impurities of the vital. There must be some transitional gradation between the two opposite poles. In the involutionary downward descent, there have to be intermediate steps by logical necessity. In the evolutionary ascent, the intervening steps are a practical necessity. In the evolution already achieved, we see these gradations. Number one, indeterminable energy creates organized matter. Note the word organized matter. Matter is organized. In the inconscience, there is no organization at all. It's a total chaotic infinite. Matter is organized. Okay? So, then, inanimate matter produces subconscious life forms. This is the second stage. Plants, etc. Life forms and plants. Subconscious life produces sense-based life forms. First of all, plants come out. Secondly, animals come out. Sense-based life forms. Insects, lower animals, etc. Animal life develops into mentalized life. So these are the gradations up to now we have seen. Intelligent life seeks even to go beyond itself. So, the sequential steps clearly establish the need for transitional steps between the mind of knowledge and the mind of man. What we are seeing of the past, we see that there is a gradation. Why should we stop at mind? Let's extend the series further on and discover them. That's what he's saying. So this is what he said in the previous para. Now we read the next para. But if such intervening gradations exist, it is clear that they must be superconscient to human mind, which does not seem to have in its normal state any entry into these higher grades of being. Man is limited in his consciousness by mind and even by a given range or scale of mind. What is below his mind, submental or mental, but neither to his scale, readily seems to him subconscious or not distinguishable from complete inconscience. What is above it is to him superconscious, and he is almost inclined to regard it as void of awareness, a sort of luminous inconscience. Just as he is limited to a certain scale of sounds and of colors, and what is above or below that scale is to him inaudible and invisible, or at least indistinguishable, so is it with his scale of mental consciousness, confined at either extremity by an incapacity which marks his upper and his nether limit. He has no sufficient means of communication even with the animal, who is his mental congener, though not his equal, and he is even capable of denying mind or real consciousness to it because its modes are other and narrower than those with which in himself and his kind he is familiar. He can observe submental being from outside, but cannot at all communicate with it or enter intimately into its nature. Equally, the superconscious is to him a closed book, which may well be filled only with empty pages. At first sight, then, it would appear as if he had no means of contact with these higher gradations of consciousness. If so, they cannot act as links or bridges, and his evolution must cease with his accomplished mental range and cannot exceed it. Nature, in drawing these limits, has written finis to his upward endeavor. So, basically, very simple what he's saying. When man looks below himself, he can't understand what is there, and he says there is no consciousness there. He is willing to accept that there is less consciousness there. When he looks above, he doesn't know that there is anything above him. So, he is limited only to his mental consciousness. So, he can't think of any gradations and all that. That's basically what he's saying. So, now he will start saying, is it really so that the human mind cannot understand what is above it? Then he will give 4 examples, okay, that we'll see. What those 4 examples are? Man can have glimpses of the higher levels of consciousness. Mother once said that I had the experience of identification with the animal life. She used to have a lot of cats and she said that she had and it is true, she said, that the animals can't understand us. Can we understand the animal? Well, they're saying hardly. To a certain extent, you can see their limitations, but you can't understand why they act or not. Okay, so again we'll follow the same method. What we'll do is we will see the summary of what he's saying, then we go into details. Okay, so the summary of what he's saying here is like this. If these intervening steps do exist at all, they are superconscious to man because he is limited to the present mental level. What is below him seems to him to be unconscious, free of all consciousness. He cannot gauge the different degrees of the subconscious. He cannot gauge, he cannot understand. Matter is unconscious, but what about animals? Animals, plants, unicellular organisms, matter. These are the things below him. Man knows nothing of what is above him, nor what is below him. This is his problem. This is very similar to the phenomenon of sound and light. So, there are sounds which our ear can't hear, which dogs can hear. Low sounds, dogs can hear, we can't hear. High-pitched sounds, bats can hear, we can't hear. So we are limited to a range of sounds. Same thing with the consciousness, mental consciousness, he's saying. We are limited there. There are ranges of consciousness below and above, but we have no access to them. Then, what about light? Light also, there is ultraviolet and infrared, and they are not available to us. Science has discovered, but the human body can't understand them. Okay, we can photograph infrared, we can also understand ultraviolet, but through instruments, not through the human.
Are you giving us a summary here?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so this is very similar to the phenomenon of sound and light. Below a certain decibel level, not above a certain decibel level, man can hear nothing below and above. Similarly, he cannot see the infrared nor the ultraviolet. Sam has not used this word, but I'm making it clear what he's saying. Okay. Likewise, man knows very little of the total cosmic consciousness. A very small range of the total consciousness is available to him. He neither knows the animal nor the gods above him. It looks then as if he has no links to the totality of consciousness. Nature seems to have limited him to his mental consciousness only. It seems that man cannot rise above his own level. But is this really so? Now, in 4 paras, he will tell you that there are cases where he can access these. I will go into detail, but before we go into details, I will tell you what he is saying. One is intuition, another is spiritual experience. Okay? Things like that. These are the 2 things which he has mentioned. There are other 4 things he will mention to show that there can be a connection, and in rare cases, man can access these higher planes of consciousness. Okay? So, but the idea is fairly simple. No? He's saying man is limited to one field. He knows neither the higher nor the lower. So, is that really so? Or is it possible for him to have experience of the higher? So, I'm reading each sentence. But if such intervening gradations do exist, I'm adding the word do, exist, it is clear that they must be superconscient to human mind, which does not seem to have its normal state, any entry into these higher grades of being. He is using the word in its normal state. All yogis have access to them, but yogi is not a normal state of mind. It's an extraordinary state of mind. Okay, so to have in normal state, any entry into these higher grades of being. Man is limited in his consciousness by mind and even by a given range or scale of mind. What is below his mind, submental or mental? Why does he say that? Because submental, plants are submental. But some animals are even beginnings of mentality is there. No? The chimpanzee, there are intelligent animals, so there is some mentality there also. So he is adding both, submental and mental. But neither to his scale, lower than his scale. Readily seems to him subconscious or not distinguishable from complete inconscience. He doesn't know exactly where inconscience is and where consciousness starts. He can't distinguish between them. What is above it is to him superconscious. It's above his consciousness, and he is almost inclined to regard it as void of awareness, a sort of luminous inconscience. Inconscience to him, but it is luminous above. Because he feels that something which is above him, yogis have experience, and this is light that is there above him. Okay, so, but to the normal man, it's inconscience. Just as it is limited to a certain scale of sounds or of colors, and what is above or below that scale is to him inaudible and invisible, or at least indistinguishable, so is it with his scale of mental consciousness, confined at each extremity by an incapacity which marks his upper and nether limits. So, he's confined at each extremity, the higher extremity and the lower extremity. The higher extremity is logic and a pure mind, and the lower extremity is the physical mind. Okay? He has no sufficient means of communication even with the animal who is his mental congener. Now, that word congener, what does it mean? He's saying the animal is a mental congener of man. So, it means a whole, a thing or person of the same kind or category as another. Basically, animal has a body and a vitality and some amount of mind. Man has the same. So, is a congener, mental congener. Okay? So, though not his equal. He is a container, but not equal. And even he is even capable of denying mind or real consciousness to it, because its modes are other and narrower than those with which in himself and his kind he is familiar. He is familiar with his own mind, but he doesn't know how the animal mind works. That's what he said.
So the question I have here is about these modes being narrower than those with which in himself and his kind. Why are they narrower?
Okay. In the mind range itself, what is available to man also, there are 3 grades. The highest grade of mental consciousness in man is logic. Mental reason, that's the highest. The pure mind is capable of reasoning out things which the animal can't do. So that's the highest. Then you have a vital mind. You have a mind which is working in tandem with the vital, and the vital has more possession on this. Suppose we have a desire, but your mind is telling you that this desire is not a good one, don't indulge in it. Chances are that you will indulge in it. The vital will win. So it is less. Then even below the vital mind, you have the physical mind. The physical mind is no logic, nothing. It is only, not even desire. It is only responding and telling you what the senses are giving data to you. Okay? The senses are collecting data from the physical world and sending these vibrations to the brain, and the brain, the physical mind, is telling you what you are seeing, what you are smelling, what you are hearing, what you are tasting, what you are touching.
Synonymous with the sense mind? Physical mind, is it synonymous with the sense dash mind? Manas?
Yes.
Synonymous.
Physical mind, yeah. That's right. Manas.
So there is no difference between manas and physical mind?
I don't think so. But he uses the word sometimes physical consciousness. And that's a little different. When you are down, you are not in the higher levels of your physical consciousness, means really down in the dumps. Okay, so that's what he means. Clear, no? The modes. Yeah. With those in himself and his kind. Narrower than those with which in himself and his kind he is familiar. He can observe submental being from outside, but cannot at all communicate with it or enter intimately into his nature. This is a normal condition of man. He cannot understand the animal. But as I told you, Mother had the experience of identification with the animal consciousness. And she says, I can assert to you that they don't understand man. She says that. But to a certain extent they can understand, na?
Yes.
Take dogs or even cats. If you shout at them and show your anger, they understand that you are not happy with them. There is a little bit of understanding, but not total understanding. They can't understand my speech. So there is a limit.
But if you say come, sit, stay,
Mechanical.
mechanically they understand, yes.
And how is that achieved? With the carrot and stick policy.
True.
They do it only because it is mechanically they are trained. All animals are trained. You tell them to sit and then show them once and reward them. So they are doing it for the reward, not for understanding your word. Okay? That's how they train animals. And if they don't do it, stick. Carrot and stick policy. So, he cannot at all communicate with it or enter intimately into its nature. Equally, the superconscious is to him a closed book, which may well be filled only with empty pages. Srimad is very fond of using images all the time, and this is a wonderful image. Maybe it's a book, but there are empty pages, nothing. There's nothing there you can understand.
It's a very good point.
So, at first sight then, it would appear as if he had no means of contact with these higher grades, higher gradations of consciousness. If so, they cannot act as links or bridges, and his evolution must cease with his accomplished mental range and cannot exceed it. Nature, in closing these limits, has written finis to his upward endeavor. In the olden days, when the books they used to finish, they used to put finis, Finis. Nowadays they put sometimes the end, sometimes they don't even put that. But that's how they put. Okay, so this is what he's saying. So now one by one in 4 paras he will tell you that no, there can be connections. The first he will speak about is intuition. We'll take examples of intuition. Then he speaks next of impersonality. You can have the experience of impersonality. Then he will talk about genius. Who is a genius? Someone who has accessed the higher limits of consciousness. And last is spiritual experience.
Are these hierarchical?
Yeah. What do you mean by hierarchical?
Gradation?
No. These are gates by which you can experience the higher planes of consciousness. If you mean to say that...
which is the highest gate?
Oh, okay, that way. I don't think so, because even intuition is a...
Yes, that's why I was asking.
No, it's not. I don't think there's a hierarchy here. There are ways by which you can experience. For instance, Einstein was a genius. He had certainly an intuition that came into his mind, but he wasn't spiritual. Towards the end of his life, he did become a little bit. You know that, na? On the internet we have his daughter is now revealing after 35 years, she's saying, I'm going to make open a letter he wrote to me, which he told me not to publish because humanity was not ready for it. And he says it is love. That's the principle. And it is that which man has to understand, not reason and not logic.
Principle of what?
Of love.
Love is the
Love, which is the principle.
ultimate principle, if you want. Okay. If you want the ultimate principle.
And Mother says it's the divine love that can save the world.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting video. It's there on the internet. You can access it. So he is one case. Even Newton is a case. These are all geniuses. They get an intuition. They are not aware that it's coming from above. Okay, but they have access to it. So that's what he will tell you. With 4 examples he will give you.
Ranganath, elsewhere in one volume, Sri Aurobindo uses the word pratibha for genius, and he explains it like this: that the prati is basically reflection and bha is light.
Yes.
So you are able to reflect that light,
That's right.
and to the extent that you are able to reflect that higher light, you are a greater and greater genius.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So now he's saying that it looks as though man has no access to the higher planes of consciousness. So he's not asking a question, but is it really so? I ended with a question mark in the last one, but now he will show you that yes, there are sometimes moments when you can access. But when we look more closely, we perceive that this normality is deceptive, and that in fact there are several directions in which human mind reaches well beyond itself, tends towards self-exceedings. These are precisely the necessary lines of contact or veiled or half-veiled passages which connect it with higher grades of consciousness of the self-manifesting spirit. First, we have noted the place of intuition. Intuition occupies in the human means of knowledge. And intuition is in its very nature a projection of the characteristic action of these higher grades into the mind of ignorance. So, I'll finish reading and then we come back to intuition. Several examples can be given of these higher grades into the mind of ignorance. It is true that in human mind, its action is largely hidden by the interventions of our normal intelligence. A pure intuition is a rare occurrence in our mental activity. For what we call by the name is usually a point of direct knowledge which is immediately caught and coated over his mental stuff, so that it serves only as an invisible or a very tiny nucleus of a crystallization which is in its mass intellectual or otherwise mental in character. Or else the flash of intuition is quickly replaced or intercepted before it has a chance of manifesting itself by a rapid illuminative mental
Imitative.
imitative by a chance of manifesting itself by a rapid imitative mental movement, insight or quick perception, or some swift leaping process of thought which owes its appearance to the stimulus of the coming intuition but obstructs its entry or covers it with a substituted mental suggestion, true or erroneous, but in either case not the authentic intuitive movement. Nevertheless, the fact of this intervention from above, the fact that behind all our original thinking or authentic perception of things, there is a veiled, a half-veiled, or a swift, unveiled intuitive element is enough to establish a connection between mind and what is above it. It opens a passage of communication and of entry into the superior spirit ranges. There is also the reaching out of mind to exceed the personal ego limitation, to see things in a certain impersonality and universality. Impersonality, the second method of contact with the higher planes of consciousness. Impersonality is the first character of cosmic self. Universality, non-limitation by the single or limiting point of view, is the character of cosmic perception and knowledge. This tendency is therefore a widening, however rudimentary, of these restricted mind areas towards cosmicity, towards a quality which is the very character of the higher mental planes, towards that superconscient cosmic mind which, we have suggested, must in the nature of things be the original mind action of which ours is only a derivative and inferior process. Again, there is not an entire absence of penetration from above into our mental limits. The phenomena of genius are really the result of such a penetration. Veiled, no doubt, because the light of this superior consciousness not only acts within narrow limits, usually in a special field, without any regulated, separate organization of its characteristic energies, often indeed quite fitfully, erratically, and with a supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible governance, but also in entering the mind, it subdues and adapts itself to mind substance, so that it is only a modified or diminished dynamics that reaches us, not at all the original divine luminosity of what might be called the overhead consciousness beyond us. Still, the phenomena of inspiration, of revelatory vision, or of intuitive perception and intuitive discernment, surpassing our less illumined or less powerful normal mind action, are there, and their origin is unmistakable. Finally, there is a vast and multitudinous field of mystic and spiritual experience, and here the gates already lie wide open to the possibility of extending our consciousness beyond its present limits, unless indeed by an obscurantism that refuses to enquire or an attachment to our boundaries of mental normality, we shut them or turn away from the vistas they open before us. But in our present investigation, we cannot afford to neglect the possibilities which these domains of mankind's endeavor bring near to us, or the added knowledge of oneself and of the veiled reality which is their gift to human mind, the greater light which arms them with the right to act upon us and is the innate power of their existence. A huge para, nearly 2 pages, and he is explaining how we can have access to the higher planes of consciousness. But it is only the last one, spiritual consciousness, is really the opening. But the others are all touches, not really the...
So then I would put spiritual consciousness the highest.
Yes, you can say that in a certain sense.
But intuition is also very high.
Intuition itself is high. In fact, this is exactly what we have to understand. These planes of consciousness are always there. Okay? We have a higher mind, then higher than that is the element mind, which is full of light. Then we have the intuitive mind and the overmind. These planes of consciousness with the powers are there, and they are constantly sending down their impulsions and their power and glory into the human mind. But we are so dense that it doesn't work. It stops somewhere there. It's like if you take the ocean, it's a good example, or even we can even take another example, okay, why it does not come down. Take the ocean, okay. The higher you go, and you just go 1 meter below, you look up, you will be able to see the light. It's sometimes even transparent, the water. But as you keep going down and down, 2 things happen. One is the density increases and the light decreases until finally at the lowest level, total density which a human being can't bear. He can't go down because the pressure will be so much that it will crush him. He has to wear a suit to go down. Okay? And the light also is absent. So now if you shine a torch, say, I want to see what is below, I have lost something and I want to see what is below, I shine a 500 watt bulb. The light will go down maybe 5 meters, 6 meters. After that, the light won't work. Then I say, okay, I want more. So I go and use a 1000 watt bulb. The light will go a little deeper. So the higher you go, the more the light can enter in. But the intuitive plane is sending its light, but our mental consciousness is so dense and so dark that it doesn't reach it. But sometimes when our mind is sufficiently clear, every mind is not dark and dense. There are intelligent people, there are people with a clarity of mind, so then the intuition will come in. But when it comes in, somebody is saying a very interesting thing happens. The mental substance that is there covers it up or swallows it up. So, just like, take a glass of water, okay, and put 3 drops of ink into it. Wait for some time. Much of the ink will settle at the lower bottom, okay, but there is a little amount of blue above that, less blue, less blue, less blue. At the higher level, probably no blue at all, okay. Now take 1 drop of pure water, okay, put it in. By the time it goes down to the lowest level, that drop, will you be able to distinguish it? No, the blue will cover it up. So this is what he is saying happens with the intuition also. The intuition comes down, but the darker mental substance swallows it up.
On a more personal level, I'd like to share something from Amal. Because when the poetry was coming down to me, sometimes I would feel that the line is not correct. And Sri Aurobindo says, don't use the mind to try and correct it. So I said to Amal, what do you do? He said 1 word, appeal. And then after a few moments he said, if you are patient, there will always be an answer. It meant an awful lot to me.
This raises another very interesting question also. Sri Aurobindo used to write Savitri, okay? But if a typed copy came to him, he would make corrections.
Yes.
So, somebody had asked him, he said that correction also is coming from the higher plane. So, it's a relative thing. Okay? So, this image of this density and darkness explains why the intuition cannot come down into us. A very good example of this is our mathematician, genius mathematician Ramanujam. Okay? He used to get these truth formulas that used to come into his mind. He could not explain it, but he could put it down. 3,000 equations which now they are being able to prove. Now. At that time he could not prove. He says, I know that this is the truth, but no mental logic. Logic is insufficient for that. Now they are seeing that yes, that most of them are true.
Because the mind has developed more? Or the intuitive
I
mind?
think they have discovered the truth of those formulas. The cosmic phenomena and what they are seeing in the universe. So they are seeing that it has applications and there is a truth to it. But at that time they could not understand. I don't think it is a higher mind that is finding the truth. No, I don't think so. Not at least the mathematical formulas, no, I don't think so. So, this is what he is saying. So, he is telling you first that although normal man does not seem to have any access to the spiritual planes of consciousness, he has, and he is talking of very interesting impersonality. What is impersonality we will have to discuss. And he is talking of the cosmicity. Okay, so that is one aspect. And he is also talking about genius. Okay, so one very good example of genius is that Nobel laureate who was a little deranged, an American.
Hawking?
Not Hawkins. He was not deranged, but he was physically. There is a very interesting movie on him.
Yes.
What's the movie?
He was an Englishman.
Beautiful mind.
Huh?
A beautiful
A
mind.
beautiful mind.
Yes.
Russell Crowe.
So,
Russell Crowe.
he used to get these things into his mind, but his normal mind is not sufficient to deal with it. There is confusion in the mind. Your darkness is not able to absorb that and understand it properly. So there is confusion. In fact, Surendra mentioned that in the paragraph here. Okay, we'll come to that. He has mentioned it. It can create confusion. In fact, that he has mentioned here. In fact, this is a very common phenomena even in a spiritual experience. Okay. So, what happens is, okay, we have got 10 minutes. Sometimes, when your consciousness rises to the above, what happens? Okay. At our level, our main guidance comes from the ego. The ego is the one that organizes our life. We are, this is me. Very clear statement. But when your consciousness rises to the spiritual level of consciousness, spiritual planes, the ego disappears. The guiding principle is gone. You don't even know who you are. You are looking and where am I? What am I? There is nothing. You are in the infinite. Confusing. So then you have this peculiar phenomena of three things which they call, okay, jadavat. You become like a stone. Okay. Or you become like a balavat, like a little child. Okay. You seem to, you don't know what you're saying, or, it's all disjointed statements and things like that. Or you behave in a very funny way. Or it can be also pishachavat and unmattavat, like a madman. But your consciousness is at a very high level. That he is mentioning here also, in this para somewhere. We'll have to look at that next time. I'll have to look for it because it's 2 pages, but he mentions it. There you are. Often indeed, quite fitfully, erratically, with a supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible governance. This is what he is mentioning. He is talking of the 4 levels. Okay? So, exactly. Genius, as in the synthesis reference I have to give, but balavat, pishachavat, jadavat, unmattavat. This can happen. The word irresponsible governance. Okay, you become like a leaf in the wind.
What about those who have near-death experiences and come back and tell what they have seen?
There, it is not that every time your consciousness rises, you will be confused. But for a certain amount of time, you will be confused. This is what happened with our famous Sadguru. What's his name? Jaggi Vasudevan. He says that when he came out of his trance, he didn't know who he was. Because the ego is gone. You identify yourself with your ego. But when you are in the infinite, you don't know who you are. I'll give you another instance of also how this can happen. But no confusion. But you're not identifying yourself with your body-mind life. Okay? So, I think I told you once. Niruddha is writing to Sri Aurobindo, you are the avatar, but I'm using my own words. But we are very satisfied with Sri Aurobindo as you are. Okay? That means we know you, your body, your thought and your reactions with us, we know, and we are very satisfied with that. Sri Aurobindo says, no problem at all. I accept what you're saying. But there is one small problem. I don't know who I am. I in inverted commas.
He says, if you can tell me who this Aurobindo pure and simple is.
There. Here's the reference. Who is this?
Aurobindo pure.
Yeah, because he is the infinite.
Yes.
He is not the ego, he is not the body-mind life. So that's what he's mentioning here. See, very clearly. Often indeed, quite fitfully. Okay, it comes in fitfully, erratically. It doesn't come in a very systematic manner. And with a supernormal or abnormal, irresponsible governance. You can even put that case of the beautiful mind, that scientist, in this category. It deranges you to a certain extent. We had several cases in the ashram like that. One was Unmattavat and one was Balavat. Okay? But Pishachavat we have not. That also was there once. There was a lady who used to behave like that, like a gaul. Okay, she is educated lady. But she will not live anywhere and she will only roam in the streets and fully aware of things. And she came from a very good family. And the family used to come and say, please, we'll give you a room and have a bath properly and eat properly. No. Complete. So they had arrangement with Jubilee restaurant, which is now closed, that whenever she comes, please give her some food. Okay. We'll pay for you. We'll pay for it. So she used to be like that. She used to go in front of the ashram. And how do we know that she was at a higher level of consciousness? Constantly she has mother's picture.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Now, a normal madman will not do that. So obviously she is at some higher level. But this is how she used to behave. Then the other case of slight derangement was a lady called Swaraj Ben. She was a Punjabi lady and she used to sit on the steps of the Samadhi on the western side, the steps are there, and go on muttering to herself. She was not normal, but not violent or mad in that sense, but a little deranged. And there was that other case of Balavat. Okay, Balavat also, there was a Bengali gentleman, tall, dark, you have not seen him. So, and he used to go rushing to the dining room at the last minute, always at the last minute. Okay, and he used to complain to mother about the smallest of things, like a little baby. Mother, this is happening, my tap is not working, this is not. But mother used to be so solicitous to him. So we never understood what it was until he passed away. And after he passed away, his experiences were there, published in Tamil Vaikare. So we came to know at what a level of consciousness he was. But in his behavior, he was like a little baby, a little child. But later on, his experiences, okay, Sri Aurobindo sonnets are there. Divine sound, the divine hearing and the divine sight. Two sonnets are there. And in the divine hearing, Sri Aurobindo is saying, all sounds are divine sounds. The harsh siren of the factory, the auto's trumpeting horn, even the screech of the eagle, all are divine sounds. He had that experience. He has mentioned that in the. So, this is what Swami is saying, that also can happen. The higher consciousness coming into you can disrupt your normal being. Okay, we stop here today.
Namaste all. Thank you for coming.